Welcome all of you to this fifth plenary session of the Economics of Happiness Conference. The title of this session is Envisaging the Future. What would a localised world look like? And for me, it's a key question.
The question rather is, how do we maintain both strands, global and local? And I believe on the local end, it means us coming together and concretizing practices that bind us together. It could mean a ritual. It could mean some kind of food network. It could mean anything, but it just means us interacting with each other. How do we maintain the global aspect as well? It also means that we have to open up spaces for learning and continuing to learn from other people. Now, how that is going to happen, I cannot tell, but I know that we cannot continue to see culture as a closed boundary. We see it as an open space for conversation with other people. Hope I did good.
Can I just come in quickly?
Yes.
One of the things in my life that I'm very happy that I did as a young man, I went to Nicaragua in the immediate aftermath of the Nicaraguan Revolution, and I specifically went there not to carry a gun, I went there to pick coffee. And I picked coffee for 3 months in Nicaragua as part of an international solidarity effort, non-violent activism to help the economic basis of that new country. For many, many years, I would hunt down Nicaraguan coffee. Okay, I wanted to keep buying Nicaraguan coffee. It meant a lot to me personally and politically. What I want to, and I want to follow the young man's question, is that one of the things that concerns me about localization, does it mean, in practice, a diminution of solidarity? Is it better for me to be going out and buying Byron Bay coffee, which is also good coffee, or should I be hunting down that Honduran, El Salvadoran, Central American coffee because those people have a huge economic challenge?
Is it, you want to, okay, is it better? That's a deep question. Is it better to want to engage in your immediate community, or is it better to want to
act in solidarity?
Act in solidarity with other spaces out there. I think that, difficult question, sorry. Okay, let Helena try.
Sure.
Let me muse on this. Let me chew this for a little while.
Okay.
I mean, from my point of view, it isn't such a difficult question because I'm looking at this economic globalization needing to shift towards economic localization. And as far as I'm concerned, that has absolutely nothing to do with isolation or a reduction in collaboration, international exchange, support, nothing. In fact, what I've experienced is that when people feel secure, and they need to feel secure in their identity as well as materially, you know, especially for men, it's incredibly important that they should be able to provide for their families and to feel that they're contributing in that way. And the current global market, which is marginalizing the 99%, is creating an absolutely clear and dramatic increase in violence, abuse of women, abuse of children, particularly from men who are feeling so frustrated because they're being robbed of their identity, robbed of their livelihood, and across the board one sees this increase. So we mustn't lose sight of this, that we're talking about this economic shift away from a few banks and corporations that are making it illegal for farmers to grow their own seeds, who want to patent them and push them on them and make sure that they put in a terminator gene so the seeds can't even be replicated. That is what we're talking about. That is a very, very clear need to transition. And in Costa Rica, what we were trying to say earlier is that when you have established this relationship, where in Costa Rica there is less money and more poverty, it's going across this global divide of currency speculation and manipulation. It's going to be very difficult for you to guarantee that your Nicaraguan coffee bought here hasn't gone through a system that's going to make them worse off. I mean, one of the ways that I've tried to lobby the fair trade movement is both with the ecological issues. They have not paid attention to the long transport miles, have only thought of how can we try to bring some money in there, and they haven't thought enough about the vagaries of the financial speculation and the change in value of currency and the glut in the market that has led to so many small producers only producing coffee, only producing cocoa, suddenly getting a tenth of what they were getting before. This is why we have a worldwide movement that is the biggest social movement in the world, called Via Campesina. Please remember that name. The biggest social movement in the world, Via Campesina, 200 million small farmers who are saying, please, 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 let us grow food for ourselves. They are for food sovereignty. And I want to thank Michael Croft, who's here in the audience. Put up your hand so people can see you, for helping to start a food sovereignty alliance in Australia.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you for the opportunity. I think it's been pretty much answered, but I was shocked because I've been involved in microcredit for about 6 years now, thinking I was doing the right thing and making changes in what I did over that time. And when Vandana said that yesterday, I was, oh my God, you know, I'd stopped ages ago putting money into people who were starting business in cities, because I was thinking, oh, I'll try to support people who are in the countryside, and I'll try to support people who are in the countryside who aren't using the money for fertiliser. And so I've been, I know, reducing the people who do send their stories to you, so you do feel you're having some sort of exchange with people. So I was thinking all along through this personal process, oh, thank goodness I finally hit on something where I feel quite happy about doing that. But I guess what I'm appreciating now, that maybe was making me feel better, but actually was not the way for me to put my Australian energy and my excess money, wasn't necessarily bringing about the desired result that I'm beginning to learn is what's necessary. So I just wanted to put that in there because I know a lot of my friends are also involved in that, and I'll have something to say to them when I go home.
If you could report back on their reactions, that would be great. Sir.
Yeah. My question is on the fear of impermanence, especially in the context of life and death. Is it with the globalized world we've started seeing dying as a bad thing and often associated a negative connotation with decay and death, which is essentially a part of ecology of the earth? So in a localized world, how we want to view dying and death and decay?
I'd like to take on that. Yes, thank you. I'm still going to answer that question.
No,
I'm chewing on it. Rich questions. Our frames of reference are different, but it's something to chew on. Yeah. Now, you said something about life and dying. I think one of the conditions for the system that we currently inhabit together is that there has been a demonization of death as a void, kind of, you know, life itself. I think that's really concretized in how our medical facilities, medical services have been, you know, set up, basically. It's about keeping life at all means, at all costs, no matter what. But, you know, indigenous traditions would lead you and, you know, bring you into a place where you start to see that, you know, there's no mutual exclusivity between life and death. Life is part of death, and death is a natural part of life as well. So we die, we live. I think that's what the local brings into the situation. But the disenchantment of our modern context leads us to think that life is just one long straight line that ends up in a black void, and then that's it forever. I think we need to reclaim the story that says that, look, I die when I live, and even death is not the end of it all. Yes.
Another question.
Hi, a question for the panel. My question is that a lot of questions have been raised during the last 2 days about what can we do, what action can we take, what can we change. My question is, or before I say the question, what I've noticed is, in terms of what you said, Mick, about solidarity and localization, I consider myself a global citizen. Mm-hmm. And I noticed living in the UK as an Australian, a lot of people say to me, the better life's over here. Why are you living in London? And I've worked with groups all over the world and done lots of work, as everyone has in this room. And to me, I'd like to ask the group your view on having people find their voices. We've found ours, you found yours, and having others find their voice, of women in the villages in India, Africa, wherever they are, to have their voice, to rise up, like we are talking about a choir. How can we have others speak out, find their voice, empower them as global citizens?
Is part of that that they're listened to?
Well, firstly, political structures get in the way of them. In Panchayats in India, the women don't have a vote. They get a vote because they can't read and write, they don't know their rights. So there's political structures, there are cultural structures and all of that that prevent them. But how can we stand in solidarity to find, in those local communities, help them find their voices, we find ours, and have all of the vessels raised as we go forward?
Thank you. Who'd like to answer that very hard question? Manish.
So, my experience, again, in just traveling and living with people and lots of wonderful, amazing women is a lot of them have their voices, we don't know their languages. And I think that's really, really fundamental thing, because I've seen it even in my, and I was talking to a friend, she has a company, and she was saying all these local indigenous people come and work in, and they're very timid and all that, and I said, what language do you speak into them? And she's like, some English and some Hindi. I said, speak to them in Wagadi, their local language. You'll see totally different people all of a sudden coming out. Very, very, men and women, both, become timid in language structures. The spaces, the political spaces we're creating are not the spaces of how people have organized themselves. The Indian Panchayat system is a total fraud. It has denied any kinds of local governance, leadership structures that existed before. It assumes that people didn't know how to manage their lives, their resources, their commons, and has removed all of that and linked them to this nationalized and corporatized party system, political party system, and said this is now the democracy that you must live and practice. So I think the fundamental, even this, again, some of the things we're unfolding is bringing in these structures, like democracy means this, and this is how you have to practice it, otherwise you are disempowered. I think some of these things we really have to come back and look at, what are we talking about? That these people have been living for thousands of years, you didn't think they had any governance? And you're putting a system and saying, well, now we have to teach them, we have to empower them, we have to make them literate on how to govern their lives. They know much more than we do about those things. And so again, it's a question of how are we listening? Are we taking, people fly in and out, development consultants, are the ones who are doing this. And they have never bothered to really learn the language, to know what people are going. When I used to work in international development, it was insane how many cut and paste reports. Once in a while, a consultant would forget to, in their thing, forget to change Bhutan into, Nigeria, and you're just like, where does this come from? So I think there's something much deeper which I would love to explore with you, that we really need to ask about what are the stories we're carrying about the other, and what we think they are. It's really. For me, the whole narrative has been around, that we're still continuing, is around dehumanizing people from the global south and people from all human beings, actually. The system is doing that to us all in various ways. So.
I would like to go back to money and sort of say that for me it's like it's our new God. And we give it some intrinsic value, and we actually compare things and say, oh, these people are poor, they live on $1 a day. I was a teacher in Poland, and I earned $12 per month. I could afford to go out, I had a unit, I could pay all the rent, all the electricity, all the food, get some clothing, go to the theater, then go out for meals. and it was $12 per month. So I think it's a big mistake to compare things using money. It just has a value because we give it value. And this was another example. I had Australian dollars. I thought I was rich. I went to Africa. It was worthless. I couldn't buy anything for Australian dollars. And that made me say, it's just our agreement. It doesn't have any real value. I'd like your comment.
Well, if I could just add, it does have value when it's going into the wrong pockets for the wrong things.
Ladakh, Bhutan, Byron Bay, 1970, small populations. There was no Woolworths in Byron Bay, and recently, it's only recently that we got one at Malambimbi. What I'm saying is, it's the population problem. The corporations would not exist if there weren't people to sell them things for.
Okay, thank you. Do people want to address that issue? No, we'll move on. Richard? Okay, sorry, no, we've jumped ahead.
Yeah, I think from our point of view, the biggest problem is not overpopulation. It's not the driver of this system that is using more and more energy, using more and more psychological expertise to turn more and more children all around the world into absolutely ardent, frightened consumers. You know, beaming in the yurts of Mongolia. I've seen it among the Maasai. Every corner now is beaming in this message. If you don't buy this right clothing and the right food, look the right skin color, you are nobody. You're condemned to nothingness. And people will say to you, we are stupid as animals. We are backward as animals. We don't speak the language, meaning English. And I've heard that across the world. When I then say, don't say that, we who've come to your country should learn a bit of your language. Then often the elders will say, please come back and say that. No one has ever said that to us. And our young people need to hear that. But so anyway, this message that's being beamed in, that's creating consumerism at a larger and larger scale, and built-in obsolescence. Products are being made faster and faster and faster turnover, basically to break as fast as possible, as fast as they can get away with. So the deregulation of speculative finance to support deregulated giant global corporations, that is the biggest problem. And of course population is also an issue, and we have to try to become aware of how we're being trained to consume. And the biggest antidote, the most effective, streamed, strategic line to turn away from consumerism is to turn to each other, as we've been saying.
Okay.
I would just add, this is one of my pet peeves, I guess. I've actually found in development circles all over the world, population is always, and so there's a certain kind of alarmist nature that it shifts conversations from very essential things that need to happen, and you move into alarmist mode. And there's a fundamentally racist element to the population debate, because it always ends up, it's those Indians and those Chinese, and then in the Indians, it's those Muslims and the villagers, and those are the ones who are creating all the problem. And I, as a middle-class person, I had my 1 or 2 kids only, so I'm relieved from the larger responsibility I have for life. And you go into schools all over the world, people are, oh, the population problem, and the blame is centered on the people who are actually living the most sustainably on the planet, and not looking at who is actually creating this mess. So I think we need to. This is a debate that really we need to, really open up again, because this population thing has gotten to the point of being ridiculous for me.
Thank you.
Which is not to deny that overpopulation is a problem vis-a-vis resources. Ideally
it's the design. It's the designs
right.
that are being created that are creating those, mega cities. It's by design. It's not by.
That's right. Yeah.
No. So I'm going to ask you not to call out, and you're going to follow Richard, who's been waiting patiently. So that's just the protocol I'm going to adopt. Please come and ask your question, but Richard's been waiting.
Just like to address this issue of the educational disconnect, because education's becoming much more global in a very rapid way. We're talking about universities offering degrees all over the world and competing with each other. We're talking about vocational education in Australia, which is now the only area that government gives money to is if there's fully nationalised accredited courses. There's no sense that we're talking about any kind of public support for local education programs. So in terms of trying to look at those, the significance of those programs, the question I've got for you as a panel is, if you were to imagine one critical education program that you would like to get involved in after this conference that maybe is not happening at the moment, in your local communities, what would that one education program be?
There's a problem in Africa, and let me streamline it to Nigeria. We're building more and more universities every day under the illusion that that is the only way we can know. I think the challenge of today is deconstructing the sites of knowledge production. Most of the time, it's all about certificates and degrees and grade points, and we find people graduating with first-class degrees in Nigerian universities that know nothing about Nigeria. And so they go out there, and it's all about how they can transit to the bank, no matter what you finished with. If I were to imagine an education program, it would have to have at its heart a community palaver, a problem that has to connect with the community. So it's no more about disciplinarity coming from the top, professors approving what I have to know according to the approved ways of knowing them. It's no longer about that. It will be about what the community decides is knowledge for them, according to indigenous ways of knowing them. So concretizing a program that is educationally appropriate to indigenous cultures is, I think, an answer to your question.
Okay. We'll make this the last, thank you, Bayo, but okay. Manish and Michael will make this out. We have to finish.
Sure. So I'll just answer that question. Had a great micro conversation just before this panel, and in fact, that's one of the things that's wonderful about this conference. It's the micro conversations, and thank you again for making this possible. But what I've come away with a new education program is, we were talking about how kids are learning, kindergarten, first grade, to start doing their banking and put away a little bit of money in their passport bank account. And I would like to start teaching kids at that level that they should burn their bank accounts and put their money together in a class kitty and spend it on school improvement.
So I would give two little ones. First, I would look for a program which encourages meaningful child labor. In that sense, that children being allowed to do meaningful work with their communities. I would look for how localization and how we can open up all of the localization spaces can be opened up as spaces of learning for children to come at any age and to come and work and contribute and do things that really matter for their community. And I also would create a process again which puts our grandmothers back in the center. And really their ways of knowing, and breaks down their ways of knowing that it comes from the heart, that looks at the heart of what's important in the present and works with that space, and also looks with the heart of connection to a much larger ecology and set of relationships. And so the grandmothers in the center, any kind of program which is doing that would be valuable as well.
I try to advocate a two-track position, and really would encourage many people to try to practice that. And on the one hand, we need urgently to raise awareness about the tsunami of interlinked capital and corporations that are getting a bigger and bigger energy appetite, a bigger and bigger appetite for minerals and resources. Winona, I think, spoke a bit about it. She could tell you more. The mega industrialization just rapidly eating up our planet. We need to raise awareness about that. And the wonderful thing about localization is that we have practical, grounded evidence that when it comes to food production and every other kind of production, we could dramatically reduce our energy need and generally our resource consumption by diversifying and localizing. So I think Mick may not have heard the arguments about the fact that small-scale diversified farming is actually much more productive per unit of land and water than big monocultures. So we have the evidence. We can show that there is another way, another type of banking, another type of farming. We have a paradigm that could, above all, build up that huge choir. So I'm very keen on trying to get that vision out as globally as possible, as quickly as possible. And so I'm very keen on the books and the films, using the internet, using our sources of all forms of communication and information. And part of what we're then demonstrating is also the real experiential, grandmother-based, relational, more holistic wisdom that we need to regain. But let's get the message out far and wide as part of the education. Thank you.
Okay. But Michael Shuman, Manish Jain, Adebayo Clement Akomolafe, and Helena Norberg-Hodge, could you thank our panel, please? Thank you all to you too.